A single mother gunned down in cold blood.
This particular murder was extremely violent.
She was shot 11 times in total. The majority of those struck her head. It essentially ripped apart her brain and severed her spinal cord.
While the initial scene looked like an attempted carjacking,
it was a crime that just didn't make any sense. Law enforcement was pretty stumped at why such a brutal crime would have occurred in this manner.
Detectives wondered if it had been a hired hit.
We learned that he had been followed, and the visuals had tracked her movements.
And when the pieces of the puzzle finally came together, it would reveal the shocking truth.
It's heartbreaking as the investigation progresses and you learn about Miss Young and really the motive for this murder.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to St. Louis, Missouri. This buzzing metropolis along the Mississippi River was the setting for a perplexing and disturbing mystery. It would take law enforcement down a dark and very twisted path to bring justice to a brave young woman. It was just before midnight on a hot summer night when a call came into the police department.
There had been a shooting on the parking lot of a White Castle.
First responders raced to the scene and found the victim slumped over the wheel of her car.
So on scene, investigators arrived to find Miss Young, who was seated in the driver's seat of her car. It was immediately apparent that Miss Young had been the victim of the shooting. There was ballistic damage through the driver's side window of her car. She had been shot multiple times.
As the victim was rushed to the hospital, her purse and wallet were located inside her car. Did it look like anything was stolen from her purse?
Nothing appears to be taken.
The victim's driver's license revealed her identity. She was 36-year-old Angie Young.
Angie was a single mom in her 30s. She had a 14-year-old daughter who was just living her life.
The tragedy deepened when investigators learned there was nothing the paramedics could have done to save her life.
Angie died from gunshot wounds to the head. She was shot 11 times in total. The majority of those struck her head. It essentially ripped apart her brain and severed her spinal cord.
So what was your reaction to the violence involved in this attack?
It was incredibly brutal. It was incredibly shocking. And it made it so much more obvious that someone desperately wanted Angie dead.
Angie had been devoted to her career caring for the elderly and to raising her daughter.
I mean, it left her only daughter, who was in high school, without a parent. She was alone. Her family was completely devastated.
Investigators quickly located surveillance video of the single mother's final moments alive.
Inside of the White Castle, all we see is Angie go in, order some food, take her food, and walk back to her car.
Investigators wondered if Angie had been the victim of an attempted carjacking that had turned deadly.
Well, they certainly considered that carjacking theory. I think that's something that investigators always look at when they're, especially in this area of town.
You know, those are typical starting points when you have a victim in their car who has been shot.
Surveillance footage from the White Castle parking lot showed the horrific details of the homicide.
It's pretty grainy. It's at nighttime, so it's almost like you're viewing the video in like a night vision mode. But you see the shooter appear from kind of the bottom of the frame, and you see, you know, from behind him as he is moving toward Miss Young in her vehicle.
What we see is a man with long dreadlocks wearing a white tank top, jeans, and tennis shoes, run from what looks like the alley behind the White Castle directly up to Angie's vehicle and open fire.
And you don't really see until he approaches or gets closer to the driver's side of the car that he's armed. But as soon as he gets to the driver's side door, he takes what I would describe as a shooting stance. He raises the pistol, and you can tell and see as he's firing shots. There's no audio. You can tell just from the muzzle flash. You can actually see shards of glass coming from the driver's side window as he's shooting rounds into the car, and then you see him quickly return from where he came towards the bottom frame of that video. And as he's fleeing from the scene where he just shot and killed Miss Young.
Could you tell if the gunman had said anything to Angie?
Not that we're aware of. It didn't appear from surveillance video that any words were exchanged, and so it appeared that the shooter literally walked up to her car and just opened fire. And then the man runs back towards the alley.
There's really no time for communication before he begins to shoot into her car. You can tell that he has something covering the bottom portion of his face.
The grisly details of the crime only amplified the mystery.
It didn't appear as if anything had been taken from the victim. In fact, it didn't appear as though the gunman even opened the driver's side door.
There appeared to be no conversation or demand. The shooter ran straight up to Angie's car and just started shooting, and he never tried to get into her car.
The shocking images baffled investigators.
It was a crime that just didn't make any sense. Law enforcement was pretty stumped at why such a brutal crime would have occurred.
But as the case unfolded, detectives never could have imagined the bizarre direction their investigation would take.
When Angie left, that truck followed down the street to the White Castle.
Did you believe the killer was inside that truck?
I think law enforcement knew that we had our shooter.
Detectives were alarmed by the overkill involved in the vicious attack on Angie Young.
So it's incredibly violent. There were more than 10 gunshots fired. It was clear that the shooting was an up-close shooting. Miss Young's car was one, if not the only car, particularly parked where she was in the lot. I think adding up all of those pieces of evidence painted a picture for investigators that this was a targeted shooting.
Police focused on answering the questions swirling around her murder.
They're trying to figure out why a single working mom was executed at a White Castle. They couldn't figure out what the motive was. There didn't seem to be anything that made sense.
It was Angie's family that came forward with a disturbing lead.
She had recently broken up with a boyfriend about a year before. His name was Leon Moss, and Leon had assaulted Angie and was actually pending trial for that.
We learned that the victim was previously a victim of a domestic assault incident. In fact, she was conveyed there from the scene by ambulance to a local hospital. Investigators learned from the local hospital of her most recent emergency contact, which happened to be a man she was dating at the time.
Did Leon Moss look anything like the gunman?
He did not look like the gunman at all. And so that's where law enforcement became very stumped, because the gunman had long dreadlocks, was muscular, was shorter, and that was not Mr. Moss's description at all.
Cell phone records showed Leon Moss, Angie's former boyfriend, had been miles away from the crime scene at the time of the shooting.
Based on Mr. Moss's cell phone records, which was all we had at the time, Mr. Moss appeared to have been at his home in St. Louis County. And so we could fairly definitively say that Mr. Moss was not the gunman in that situation.
With Leon Moss on the back burner, police ramped up their efforts and quickly located a witness.
So there was a gentleman who was sitting on his porch 2 streets behind the White Castle. And while he was sitting there, he saw a white 4-door truck pull up onto the block and saw someone get out of the passenger side. He didn't think much of it at that point in time. The man stood to the side for a moment, and frankly, the gentleman thought the man was urinating, and then walked away from the truck. Shortly thereafter, the gentleman heard gunshots and then saw that same man running back toward the truck, get in the passenger side, and the truck fled.
It was clear the gunman wasn't working alone.
They knew that at least 2 people were involved at that point in time, that someone was acting as a getaway driver. So they knew that information certainly, and they also were then trying to figure out what the motive was at that point in time.
The witness provided critical information about the truck.
The witness was not able to provide a very detailed description of the person that he saw getting out of the car, but provided a very detailed description of the vehicle itself. And so at that point in time, investigators had a description of a white 4-door truck that they were able to really crack the case with.
And it was interesting because his account was so detailed. I think he was a car guy. So it wasn't just the make, model, color, white Chevy Silverado, but it was detailed. Like, he told us about the grille, detail about that. I think he gave us information about the wheels, about the exterior lights on the car.
A BOLO, or be on the lookout, was immediately issued for the truck while detectives created a timeline of Angie's last known steps.
So they talked with a number of Angie's friends and actually the person that she talked to on the phone right before she went into the White Castle. And they learned that Angie had been at a friend's property, not particularly far from the White Castle, where friends would gather, they would play cards, they would play games.
Security footage from outside her friend's apartment revealed a crucial clue.
They could see Angie's vehicle parked, and then they could see, parked across the street for almost an hour, a white 4-door truck that matched the description of that witness. And then when Angie left, that truck followed down the street to the White Castle. She had left Pops and was planning on grabbing some food and then heading about the rest of her evening.
A clearer picture of the murder was slowly coming into focus.
Those details, further suggested that this was a targeted shooting, a targeted murder, and that this was something that had been planned out.
Detectives questioned everyone in Angie's life.
They followed every possible lead. Anybody who might have a grudge against Angie, anybody who might have a reason to kill Angie.
It was all hands on deck to bring answers to Angie's loved ones. So what was the officer's reaction when he saw the vehicle?
When he found that truck, it was a huge break in the case.
Detectives investigating Angie Young's homicide were convinced if they could find the white truck that had been identified at the scene, it might lead them to her killer.
Everyone was incredibly committed to making sure that Angie and her family received the justice that they deserved.
Angie's ex-boyfriend, Leon Moss, had an alibi for the time of the shooting, but detectives wanted to take a closer look at the charges she had filed against him.
Leon Moss had pending charges for assaulting Angie Young, and particularly about a year and a half before, Angie Young had been taking her 14-year-old daughter to school, and Leon Moss appeared out of the blue in his own vehicle and began ramming Angie's car multiple times. He caused about $6,000 of damage to her car. Fortunately, she was not personally injured, but he had been charged with that assault and with the property damage of her vehicle.
When was Angie supposed to testify against him?
And that case was actually set for trial on August 29th, 6 days after Angie was murdered.
Investigators went to his property to question him, and what they found provided the key to cracking the case.
They just so happened to see a white 4-door truck that matched the description that they had seen on the surveillance video parked in front of that residence. And so again, immediately that raised their suspicions, that raised their concerns. It was huge for law enforcement.
Because they had such a great description on the truck, we're able to see, corroborate the details that witness had provided about distinctive features of the truck. They were pretty confident that when they found that white Chevy Silverado, it was the vehicle that was used by the individuals who were directly involved with killing Miss Young.
When the truck was sent in for processing, the results from the lab were promising.
What they found actually was some latent fingerprints that were on the passenger side of the vehicle and a palm print on the driver's side of the vehicle.
The prints were put into the automated fingerprint identification system, and the database found a match.
The crime lab was able to determine that those prints matched an individual named Christopher Spades. Investigators knew that the shooter was in the passenger seat of that truck.
And there was more.
Christopher Spades matched the physical description of the shooter.
What went through your mind when you saw his photo?
Law enforcement knew that we had our shooter.
Christopher Spades had a lengthy criminal history.
Law enforcement was familiar with Christopher Spades. He had a number of arrests. He was associated with heroin distribution and other violent crime from that area.
But one question still remained.
What they didn't know was how Christopher Spades was in any way connected to either Angie Young or to their prime suspect, Leon Moss.
Detectives cast a wide net to find that connection.
What law enforcement did at that point in time was really a stroke of genius. They put out in their computer system an alert so that anyone who was an associate of Christopher Spades, if they were arrested, they interviewed them.
And the interviews paid off. Law enforcement discovered that Christopher Spades and an associate named Donald White had been paid to commit the crime. And the man who had orchestrated it all was Angie's ex-boyfriend, Leon Moss. His plan was to keep her from testifying against him in the upcoming trial.
He had this pending case for domestic assault where Miss Young was the victim.
What we learned was that he was willing to do whatever it took to make sure that Angie Young would not come to court.
Investigators found evidence that Moss had paid Donald White and Christopher Spades $10,000 to carry out his plan.
So the truck sat outside Pops, waited for Angie to leave, followed her there, and then Christopher Spades ran out of the vehicle and executed Angie. Christopher Spades received $7,500 and Donald White took the other $2,500.
It was a shocking and callous motive.
He executed this woman simply to avoid taking responsibility for his own actions.
This poor woman was targeted and killed so she wouldn't move forward and, telling a jury that she had been previously abused. She was brave and resilient and was prepared to face her abuser in court.
Leon Moss, Christopher Spades, and Donald White were tried and convicted for committing Angie Young's senseless murder and were sentenced to life in prison. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. Serving as a witness in a criminal case may carry with it some safety risks, but there are resources available to help maximize your safety. For example, if you're threatened or experience violence, contact the police and a witness advocate or prosecutor in the case. Seek support from local witness support services who can provide therapy and other resources to victims and witnesses of crimes. You can also contact the National Center for Victims of Crime at the Victim Connect Resource Center at victimconnect.org. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.